Hello ladies and gents, welcome to another installment in the Creepypasta Chronicles, the series where in each episode, we take a dive into the history and lore surrounding a chosen creepypasta. Our subject today is the Majora's Mask creepypasta, more famously known as Ben Drowned. This pasta is quite a bit different from the previous entries in the Chronicles so far, being less about a specific entity or creature, and more about an old internet legend. It is also not quite as large as previous entries, with a history that spans a shorter time range of activity. It is definitely a pasta in a particular niche. As such, I will be dividing this video into less parts than usual, including a quick bit of history, a proper reading of the pasta, and a rating. Simply put, there's just not as much else here to analyze, or cover outside of the actual story. Make no mistake though, this is still a very long creepypasta, so this video should not lack anything in length. And regardless of the shorter history, Ben Drowned is still an iconic pasta nonetheless. So, sit back, grab your cursed N64 cartridges, and get ready for a story best suited for telling around a campfire. The events that popularized Ben Drowned as a creepypasta spanned mostly through 2010 and a bit of 2011. On September 7th of 2010, 4chan user JadUsable posted a thread about his experiences with the supposedly haunted Majora's Mask cartridge. As many of you may know, Majora's Mask is a Legend of Zelda game from the Nintendo 64, serving as a sequel of sorts to Ocarina of Time. But that's not too important for this. Among a general description of his claims on his thread, Jad posted links to various YouTube videos he claims to have recorded while playing the cartridge. This, he no doubt hoped, would add more credibility to the myth he had crafted. The specifics of all this will be expanded upon later when we read the proper creepypasta, as right now I want to focus on the history. Only a couple of days after Jad opened his thread and began spreading his story, a YouTube video was uploaded by user Holly Hero Yui, outlining some of the methods used to create the multiple Ben Drowned videos Jad had deployed. By September 20th of 2010, Jad officially revealed that the entire Ben Drowned story and everything tied to it was fake, nothing more than something he came up with in college. On February 21st of 2011, the entire creepypasta was officially posted to the Within Hubris forum board. Within Hubris was actually launched that very same month, several days before the pasta was posted. The site had a short lifespan, but shenanigans involving Ben Drowned on the board led to an increase in popularity for the pasta. Since 2010, the story has been posted to many other well-known sites, such as Kotaku, Facebook, and Zugo Gaming. The original Facebook fan page had amassed over 6,000 likes by October of 2011, which was a great feat for the time. Another little bit of history tied to Ben Drowned is the existence of various catchphrases that were popularized thanks to the pasta. Examples include, "You shouldn't have done that," and "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" Shortly before Jad debunked his own story in September of 2010, he had created a website with the address youshouldn'thavedonethat.net, which he claimed was for a cult calling themselves the Moon Children. This probably helped popularize the phrases even more. There is also a healthy amount of fan art behind Ben Drowned on DeviantArt these days, which can be found when searching with the tag #Majora's Mask Creepy. With that, majority of the history has been covered, and we will now move into reading the proper creepypasta. Post number 1, September 7th, 2010. Okay, X-Board, I need your help with this. This is not a copypasta, this is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is a video game related post, specifically about Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest shit that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm room starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play all of those old games of my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros., and while beggars can't be choosers, Needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating up level 9 CPUs. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, F-Zero, and 2 other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there, and only one table was set up with random junk on it. But something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, but I got out of the car and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there weren't other people around within shouting distance, I would not have even thought about approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and I immediately noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed-over look about it. I forced myself to look into his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation when he would inevitably tell me that he had no idea what a video game was. But to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy, and turned to head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on his table. Littered across his table were rather peculiar paintings, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one was visiting this guy's garage sale. These weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing. As I came to the last one, for some reason it looked almost like Majora's mask, the same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outward. Initially, I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find that game at these garage sales, some Freudian bullshit was projecting itself into the ink blots. But given the events that happened afterward, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I would have asked the man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit I jumped out of reflex and I laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that someone had written Majora on it in black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was and asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention to then. I was too caught up in not only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge and there's no guarantee it would work. But then the optimist inside me interjected that maybe it was some kind of beta version or a pirated version of the game, and that was all I needed to be back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying, "Goodbye then." At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that the man had said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine, and there was one save file named simply Ben. "Goodbye, Ben," he was saying. "Goodbye, Ben." I felt bad for the man, obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the masks and 3 out of 4 remains of the bosses. I noticed that he had used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 and by the Stone Tower Temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had come so close to beating the game, but he never finished it. I made a new file named Link out of the tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady-looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran. literally just like a retail copy of this game, save for a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. I figured it was just a bug, a fluke in the programming, causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while, and it was around after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save files and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the file just out of respect of the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 files anyway. I hoped that deleting it would solve the problem. It did and didn't. Now NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. My save file name was still called Link, though. Frustrated, and with homework to do, I put the game down for a day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now, some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those of you who don't, you can Google it, but the gist of it is that right as the clock is about to hit 000 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown disappears and you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch to try and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game, the trippy boxed-in area, staring at Skull Kid hovering above me. There was no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and the background music which was regular for the area, but still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Nothing would happen though, and this kept up for about 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when text appeared on my screen. You are not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started navigating the room again, testing to see if that was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game like this was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen, and again, like the first one, it was already a pre-existing phrase. Go to the lair of the temple's boss, yes or no. I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press and how the game would react, when I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes and the screen faded to white, with the words Dawn of a New Day, with the subtext, a bunch of L's, beneath it. Where I was ported to filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I am normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that it seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of Clocktown. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day one, only to find that all of the inhabitants were gone. Usually with the 4th day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dog that runs around outside the tower. This time, they were all gone. What replaced them was the ominous feeling that there was something out there, in the same area as me, and that it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point, I wasn't even considered for my avatar. I felt that I personally was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was the Song of Healing, ripped straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up so as if you should expect something to pop out at you, but nothing ever did. and the constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then I would hear the faint laugh of the happy mask salesman in the background, just quiet enough so that I wasn't sure if I was hearing things, but just loud enough to keep me determined to find him. I looked in all 4 zones of Clocktown, only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing. West Clocktown had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken. Hopelessly broken. As the reverse song of healing repeated from what must have been the 50th time, I just remember standing in the middle of South Clocktown, realizing that I had never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I don't know whether it was the combination of the out-of-place textures and the atmosphere, and the haunting melody of the once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and distorted, but I was literally on the verge of tears, and I had no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here, and this powerful sense of depression that was both foreign and crippling. I tried leaving Clocktown, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black, and I would just zone in to another part of Clocktown. I tried playing my ocarina. I wanted to escape, and I did not want to be here. But every time I played the Song of Time, or Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes echo far, but nothing happens." By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me here. I didn't want to go inside the buildings. I felt that I would be too vulnerable there to whatever I was terrified of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head, and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me. Not Link, me, with Skull Kid's scream playing in the background, and when the screen returned, I was staring at the Link statue from playing the song of Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with that haunting facial expression. I turned around and ran out back into South Clocktown, and to my horror, the effing statue followed me, and the only way I can compare this is like the weeping angels from Doctor Who. Every so often, at random intervals, the animation would play of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me, or, I don't even want to effing say it, haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysterics, but not even once did the thought of turning off the console occur to me. I don't know why. I was so wrapped up in it. The terror felt all so real. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear right behind me every single time. Link started to begin to make weird animations I had never even seen him do before. He would flail his arms around or spasm randomly, and the screen would cut to the happy mask salesman smiling again for a brief moment before I was face to face with that effing statue again. I ended up running into the Swordmaster's dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just wanted some kind of assurance that I'm not alone here. To my dismay, I found no one, but as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused and backed into a corner, I just stared at the statue, waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed again to the happy mask salesman, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring at me. Whatever was left of the fourth wall was completely shattered, while I ran out of the dojo, terrified. Suddenly, the game warped me to an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again, as I was giving a brief moment of rest before the statue started appearing behind me again. This time aggressively. I could only take a few steps before it would summon behind me again. I hurriedly made my way out of this tunnel and appeared in southern Clocktown. As I ran aimlessly, in a sheer panic, suddenly a re-dead screamed, and the screen faded to black as Dawn of a New Day, and LLLLLLL appeared again. The screen faded in, and I was standing on top of Clock Tower with Skull Kid hovering over me again, silent. I looked up and the moon was back, looming just meters above my head, but the Skull Kid just stared at me hauntingly with that effing mask. A new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse. In some sort of desperate attempt, I equipped my bow and fired off a shot at the Skull Kid, and it actually hit him, and he played an animation of him reeling back. I fired again, and on the third arrow, a text box appeared saying, "That won't do you any good. Hee hee." And I was picked up off the ground, levitated upwards on my back, and then Link screamed as he burst into flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any moves. As the death screen played, my lifeless body still burning, the Skull Kid laughed and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force, and he immediately burst into flames again, killing him. This time, during the death screen, the faint sounds of the reverse song of healing could be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed that there was no music playing this time, that all there was an eerie silence. I remembered that in the original encounter with Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again horrifically exploded into flames and he died. As the death screen neared its end, it began to chug, as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. When the screen came to, it was the same scene as the first 3 times, except this time, Link was lying on the ground, dead in a position I had never seen in the game before. His head tilted towards the camera, with the Skull Kid floating above him. I couldn't move. I couldn't press any buttons. All I could do was just stare at Link's dead body. After about 30 seconds of this, the game simply faded out with the message, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking you out to the title screen. Upon getting back to the title screen and starting again, I noticed my save file was no longer there. Instead of Link, it was replaced with "Your Turn." "Your Turn" had 3 hearts, 0 masks, and no items. I selected "Your Turn," and immediately when I did, I was returned to the Clocktown rooftop scene of my Link dead and the Skull Kid hovering over, with the Skull Kids laughing, looping again and again. I quickly hit the reset button, and when the game booted up again, there was one more save file added, below "Your Turn," entitled Ben. Ben's save file is right back where it was before I deleted it, at the Stone Tower Temple with the moon almost crashing. I turned the game off at that point. I'm not superstitious, but this was way too effed up even for me. I haven't played it at all today. Hell, I didn't even get any sleep last night. I kept hearing the reverse song of healing music in my head, and just remembering the sense of dread I felt exploring Clocktown. I drove back to the old man's house today to ask him some questions with a buddy of mine. No way I was going there alone, only to find that there's a "for sale" sign in the front yard, and when I rang the door, no one was home. So now I'm back here writing down the rest of my thoughts and recording what happened. Sorry if some of this has grammatical errors and whatnot. I'm running on no sleep here. I'm terrified of this game, even more so now that I relived it a second time writing all this down. But I feel like there's still a lot more to it than meets the eye, and that there's something calling me to investigate this further. I think Ben is something in this equation, but I don't know what, and if I could get a hold of the man, then I would be able to find some answers. I need another day or so to recuperate before tackling this game again. It's already taken a toll on my sanity, I feel like, but next time I do this, I'm going to be recording my footage all the way through. The idea to record only came to me towards the end, so you see the last few minutes of what I saw, including Skull Kid and the elegy statue, but it's on YouTube here. I'm going to stay in this thread for a little while longer before I fall asleep to answer any questions you guys might have, or hopefully listen to your ideas or theories to help me shed some light into this, or maybe things I should try to do. I think I'm going to try to play Ben's save file tomorrow to see what happens. Maybe I was supposed to do that all along. I don't believe in paranormal shit, but this is a little effed up. But maybe this Ben guy is really just a good hacker/programmer. I don't want to think about the alternatives if he isn't. That's the end of the copy-paste. I'm hoping that maybe this is some kind of running gag the developers had, and that other people have gotten gagged or hacked copies of the game like this. This just really scares me. Post number 2, September 8th, 2010. I'm going to post what happened and link the video footage, but last night everything got too real for me. I think I'm done messing around with this. I passed out pretty much immediately after making that thread, but last night, that Elegy of Emptiness statue, I had a dream about it. I dreamt that it was following me in my dream, that I would be minding my own business when I'd feel my neck hair stand on end. I would turn around, that thing, that horrible lifeless statue, would be staring with those empty eyes right at me, merely inches away. In my dream, I remember calling it Ben, and never before had I had a dream that I could remember so vividly. But the important thing is, I did get some sleep, I suppose. Today, putting off playing the game as long as I could, I drove back up to that neighborhood to see if the old man came back. As expected, the car was still gone and no one was home. As I was walking back to my car, the man next door mowing the grass killed the power to his lawnmower and asked me if I was looking for someone. I told him that I was looking to talk to the old man that lived here, to which he told me what I already knew. He was moving. Trying a different avenue, I asked if the old man had any family or relatives I could talk to. I discovered that this old man had never been married, nor did he have any children or grandchildren through adoption. Starting to become worried, I asked one final question, one that I should have asked from the beginning. Who was Ben? The man's expression turned grim, and I learned that 4 doors down, around 8 years ago on April 23rd, the man informed me that it was the same day as his anniversary. That's how he knew the specific date. There was an accident with a young boy named Ben in the neighborhood. The accident was shortly after his parents had moved, and despite any further attempts to talk to the man to get more information, he wouldn't divulge anything else. I went back and started playing again. I loaded up the game and immediately I jumped at the title screen where the mask flies by. The sound that played was not the normal whoosh sound. It was something much more higher pitched. I pressed start, bracing for the worst, but just like 2 nights ago, the files Your Turn and Ben were displayed. Truth be told, I looked at the Ben file earlier. It seems to fluctuate between displaying the owl save and not. I brought up the Ben file, hesitated for a moment, noticing that the stats were not the same as they originally were 2 days ago. It seemed like he had already completed the Stone Tower Temple this time. Summoning my courage, I selected it. Immediately, I was thrust into complete chaos. Sure enough, I was outside Stone Tower Temple, but that's about all that was expected. The zone itself wasn't called Stone Tower Temple, but rather Stone, with spaces in between the O, N, and E. And immediately, a dialogue box of complete gibberish that I couldn't make out greeted me. Link's body was distorted. His back was cocked violently to the side, where his posture was permanently disfigured. Link's expression was dull, almost monotonous. He had an expression on his face that I didn't recognize before. It was a blank look, as if he was dead. As Link stood there, his body spasmed irregularly back and forth. I examined what had become of my avatar, and noticed I had a C button item I had never seen before, some kind of note, but pressing it did nothing. Sounds played back and forth that I didn't recognize from the game, almost demonic in nature, and there was some kind of high-pitched yip or some kind of laugh or something playing in the background. I had all of 2 minutes to take in the environment before another one of those effing elegy statues of emptiness was summoned, and immediately after I was cut into the Dawn of a New Day screen, except this time it was without the LLLLL subtext. Actually, side note out of the story, I don't think these are L's he's quoting. I think they're like those pipe symbols that you can type on the keyboard. But anyway, back into the story. I was a Deku scrub in Clocktown. I was a Deku scrub in Clocktown. This scene would normally play after the first time you traveled back in time. Tattle would say, What just happened? It's as if everything has... But instead of saying, start it over, she finished her remark in broken text as the laugh of the happy mask salesman played in the background. I was put back in control of my character, but from an effed up camera angle. I was looking from behind the door to the clock tower, watching my avatar run around as a Deku scrub. Seeing as how I really had no place to go because I couldn't see anything, I begrudgingly went inside the door. There, I was greeted by the happy mask salesman, who simply told me, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before the screen whited out. I was in Termina Field as a human again. I might as well not have been playing the same game anymore. I was being warped around and there was no sign of a day clock or anything. I took a moment to get my bearings as I looked around the field, and immediately I could tell that this was not normal. There were no enemies, and a twisted version of the Happy Mask Salesman's theme was playing. I decided to run towards Woodfall before I noticed a gathering of 3 figures off to the side, one of them being Epona, Link's horse for anybody who doesn't know. As I approached them, to my horror, I saw the Happy Mask Salesman, the Skull Kid, and the Elegy of Emptiness statue just standing there. I figured maybe they were bugged out, but by now I told myself that I should know better. Nevertheless, I approached them carefully and found that the Skull Kid was playing some kind of idle animation on loop. Same with Epona, and the Elegy of Emptiness statue was doing what it has been doing all along, just standing there, eerily. It was the Happy Mask Salesman that scared me more profoundly than the other 2. He too was idle, wearing that shit-eating grin, but wherever I moved, his head slowly turned and followed me. I had not engaged in any dialogue with him, nor was I in combat with him, yet his head still continued to follow my movements. Reminded of my first encounter with the Skull Kid on top of Clock Tower, I pulled out my ocarina, to which the game played the ding sound when you're supposed to play your ocarina, and tried a song I hadn't played yet, the Happy Mask Salesman's own song, and the song that had been playing on loop back in Day 4, the Song of Healing. I finished playing the song, and as I did, an ear-piercing shriek blasted on my TV. The sky immediately started flashing. The Happy Mask Salesman's twisted theme song sped up, intensifying the fear inside of me, and Link exploded into flames and died. The 3 figures stayed lit up during my death screen as they watched my lifeless body burn. I can't describe to you how sudden and terrifying the transition from eerie to terror it is. You are going to have to watch the video if you want to see firsthand. That same fear that caused me to lose sleep 2 days ago started to grip me again as I was met with the text, "You've met with a horrible fate, haven't you?" for the 3rd time. There has to be some kind of meaning behind that. I had little time to ponder as I was immediately given another small cutscene of transforming into a Zora, and now I found myself in Great Temple Bay. Hesitant but curious to see what the game had in store for me, I slowly made my way towards the beach, where I found Epona. I wondered why the game had decided to put her here. Was the game implying she was trying to get a drink? Unable to take the mask off, I decided that riding the steed wasn't the reason she was placed there. Suddenly, I realized that Epona kept neighing, and the way she was angled made it look like she was trying to signal a point to me off in the distance. It was a hunch, but I dove down into Great Bay and started swimming. Sure enough, I almost missed it. I found something at the bottom of the ocean, one last Elegy of Emptiness statue. I went down to examine it, and suddenly my Zora started doing a choking animation I had never seen a Zora do before, which didn't even make sense because Zoras can breathe underwater. Regardless, my character choked to death and died, and again the statue was the only thing that highlighted in my death. I didn't respawn this time. I was booted back to the main menu, as if I restarted the console. The press start screen was before me. I knew the only reason why it would put me here is because the save files had changed again. Taking a deep breath, I pressed start, and I was right. The new save files told me about Ben. Now it made sense why the statue appeared when I tried to go to the laundry pool. The game must have anticipated how I would have tried to escape the Day 4 clock town. The 2 save files told me his fate. As I suspected, Ben was dead. He had drowned. The game obviously isn't through with me. It taunts me with the new save files. It wants me to keep playing. It wants me to go further. But I'm done with this shit. I'm not touching any more of the files. This is already way too horrifying for me, and I don't even believe in the paranormal, but I'm running out of explanations. Why would someone send me this message? I don't understand it. I just get too depressed thinking about this. The footage is up here for those who want to see it and try to analyze it. Maybe there's some kind of coded message in the gibberish or something symbolic in what I went through. I'm too emotionally and mentally drained to F with it anymore. Post number 3, September 10th, 2010. I know it's early in the morning. I stayed up all night. I can't sleep. I don't care if people see this. That's not the point. I just want the word to get spread so I don't suffer for nothing. I've lost the will to type about this. The less I dwell on this, the better. I think the video just speaks for itself. I did what you guys told me to do. I played the Elegy of Emptiness song at the first prompt by the game I was given. But I think that's what the game, or Ben, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm even humoring the absurd idea that he exists in the game, wanted me to do. He's following me now, not just in the game, he's in my dreams. I see him all the time, behind my back, just watching me. I haven't gone to any of my classes. I've stayed in my dorm room with the windows closed and the blinds shut. That way I know he can't watch me. But he still gets me when I play. When I play, he can still see me. The game is scaring me now. It talked to me for the first time. Not just using text that's already in the game. It spoke to me. Talked to me. It referenced Ben. It talked to me. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it wants. I never wanted this. I just want my old life back. Stuff like this doesn't happen to people like me. I'm just a kid, not even old enough to drink yet. It's not fair. I want to go home. I want to see my parents again. I'm so far away from home here at this school. I just want to hug my mom again. I just want to forget that statue's horrible blank face. My original game file is back, just the way I left it before it was gone. I don't want to play anymore. I feel like something bad will happen if I don't, but that's impossible. It's a video game. Want it or not, it can't hurt me, right? Like seriously though, it can't, right? That's what I keep telling myself, but every time I think about it, I'm not so sure. Post number 4, September 12th, 2010. Let me just clear things up. I know you guys are worried, but Jada Usable is okay. He finished moving out today and he said he's coming back home. He's just taking the semester off. I'm not really sure what's happened. I have a vague idea, but you guys probably know more than I do. I'm Jad Usable's roommate, and obviously I knew something was wrong with him for a few days now. He stayed in his room all the time, fell out of contact with literally all of his friends, and I'm pretty sure he hadn't been eating hardly anything. After the second day, I couldn't stay in there anymore, so I've been crashing at a buddy's place, only coming into my room to get the stuff that I need. I tried talking to him several times, but he would cut me off or keep the conversation brief when I asked him about his strange behavior. It was like he was convinced something was hunting him. Yesterday, I came to grab my philosophy book and he approached me, looking awful, like horrible bags under his eyes. He handed me a flash drive and gave me specific instructions. He told me that he needs me to do one last favor for him. He finally explained to me what has been going on, gave me the account info to his YouTube account, and told me that he's getting away from here, that it lured him to play it again instead of trying to change things, and that he shouldn't have done that, and to upload the footage and inform people what happened. I told him that he could do it himself, and he got this wild look in his eye and told me that he is never looking at that game again, and that's the last thing he said to me. He never even said bye when his parents came to pick him up. I never even got to meet his parents. I honestly can't tell you what happened. When he spoke, it was kind of hard to understand him, and his effed up appearance really distracted me. On the flash drive, there was the footage of the game last night, a text document with his name and password for YouTube, and a third document called thetruth.txt, containing what he told me were his notes that he'd taken. He told me that this meant everything to him, that I follow his instructions exactly. Normally I wouldn't be so to the letter for a request over an effing video game, but the way he spoke and the way he looked made me know this was really serious, and I'm going to honor that. I've had this video since yesterday, but had to have someone help me use Pinnacle. That's not really my forte. Then after watching it, I had to go back through and look at his other videos on his YouTube account to realize what was going on, and even then, I'm really confused. The video I'm releasing tonight, Truth.txt will be released on September 15th, just like you requested. I haven't dared peek at it yet, so the first time I see it will be the first time you see it, out of respect to my friend. To answer your questions, no, I haven't tried calling him yet. I think I'll give him a call tomorrow to see if he's okay or not. He should have gotten back home by now. About the video. In this video, I cut straight to when he loaded the Ben file in the game. Looking back, I realized that Jad Usable left the save select screen in because it said different names sometimes, so my bad for that. But all it said this time was the same at the end of his last video, Link and Ben. Nothing different. I wasn't there when he played it, but it looks to me like in the beginning when he first spawns, he's testing out his equipment or seeing what items he has or something. Because apparently, they've changed randomly before. Then, after that, I just think the game got too personal for him. Post number 5, September 15th, 2010. Hey guys, Jad Usable here. This will be the last time you'll be hearing from me, and this is my final gift to you. These are the notes that I have taken and the realizations I've made. Before I delve into this, I want to thank you for following me and thank you for listening. It feels like the weight of a powerful burden is about to be lifted. By the time you read this, I won't be around anymore, but after spending 4 days with this maddening game, I have begun to understand what's really at play here, and hopefully, after reading this, we can ensure that this never happens again. There are things that I could not share with you while this was going on due to the circumstances to which I'll explain. With Ben blocking any attempt I made to try and relay the truth to you, I tried, ever so subtly, to warn you guys in various ways. Amidst the chaos in my delirium, I devised and made a barely noticeable pattern in my videos. In all 5 videos I recorded over the 4 days, I have either had the Mask of Truth interacted with the Gossip Stone, or the Lens of Truth equipped at some point. For you Zelda enthusiasts, these are all symbols of honesty and trustworthiness, and I would hope that one of you may have picked up on the reference. As I played the file, I would name Ben, being mindful of how Ben was watching over my every move in the game. I made a point to avoid doing anything too obvious, but I sent out a hidden message to you guys. I never equipped the lens nor the mask, nor visited a stone. It worked, and the video was uploaded. I prayed that someone would notice the pattern didn't apply to Ben. The tags followed suit too. I hope you guys paid attention to those as well. They were my little messages to you. Nothing big enough that would catch Ben's attention or make him suspect anything. With Ben manipulating and changing my files, I honestly hope that what you guys saw was close to what actually happened, but there is no way for me to know. This may be a long read. I don't have time to proofread or make all of my research pretty, but here it all is. And with that, guys, we're actually going to end this reading. I'm going to leave these notes here if you're interested. You could just type Ben Drowned Creepypasta online and check it out on the Creepypasta Wiki. The whole thing's on there. There are quite a bit of notes, kind of styled in like by date and time. It's a lot. This video will be very long if I put it all in there. Pretty much, it's just a bunch of notes considering what he's been talking about in this story. And then at the very end, he talks about how this whole thing was just a hoax that he made up while in college. The whole thing ends with, "Thanks again, Jad Usable." So now we will go on to the rating. Alright, so let's get right into the rating. At first, I had it in mind to be quite harsh in terms of horror rating on Ben Drowned. Comparing it to The Rake, for example, it doesn't quite tickle my horror bone as much. But after reading the story again for this video, and putting some thought into it while brushing my teeth, don't ask, I have decided to shift my stance. Ben Drowned presents a different kind of horror than seen in previously covered pastas. You see, my favorite kind of horror is body horror, grotesque, gritty stuff, the likes of The Rake and Dead Space, which is a video game, check it out. Situations where the normal anatomy of life is twisted and warped into something wrong, something often evil. That is the kind of horror that really gets in my head. And mind you, it used to be so much worse in my youth. But anyway, Ben Drowned presents something different to this. Psychological horror. The events that supposedly occurred surrounding Jad Usable and his haunted Majora's Mask cartridge are not gory or grotesque. They don't involve zombies or mutants, but they do involve unsettling occurrences, disturbing music, mysterious happenings that shouldn't be coded in a Majora's Mask game, and more. All of these things mess with one's mind, setting off alarm bells. This is, in essence, a player mentally and literally trapped in a warped virtual world, not understanding what is going on. A video game haunting of sorts. I will admit, if it were I who booted my N64 on and dealt with this, I would be unsettled, to say the very least. So I will relent from my original rating and give Ben Drowned a 4 out of 5 spooky scary skeletons. I think I was going to give it like a 2 originally. Moving on. In terms of realism, this wasn't the most unrealistic pasta ever, since it didn't involve any cryptid-inspired creatures like Slender Man, but it is still easily identifiable as fake. I could just be lazy and give it a lower-end realism rating for this reason, but you know what? I feel like going a little deeper. The horror here is from the mystery of the occurrences in Jad's copy of Majora's Mask, aka the whole Ben situation and everything that happened as a result. Does it matter if the haunting was genuine or not? If, say, it turns out Jad was just playing a horror hack of Majora's Mask, made by somebody else, the thrill would still be there. As I said, this is psychological horror. Even if it was all man-made, it still gets in one's head in a bad way. So with that being said, I think there's a lot more realism to this story than meets the eye. Even more so if you are the type to believe in ghosts. I can see this kind of situation occurring in real life, even if it doesn't involve an actual dead guy named Ben haunting an N64 game. So I will again relent and give Ben Drowned 3.5 out of 5 skeletons. For mystery, this whole pasta is built around it. In fact, I'd say this is one of the best OG creepypastas out there if you're looking for mystery. The fact that Jad had this seemingly haunted copy of Majora's Mask without a clue as to why it was corrupted fits the bill perfectly. Yes, as the tale went on, more and more was revealed, and things certainly got crazy. But this was really a journey of a dude in the metaphorical dark, trying to figure out what the heck was up with this crazy cartridge he bought off a sketchy old man. And for that, I give Ben Drowned 4.5 skeletons out of 5. Finally, for depth, as I've said earlier, this pasta is one of the smaller ones out there in terms of its legacy and history. Majority of interest surrounding it happened during its active creation in 2010. By September of 2010, the creator himself had debunked the whole thing and laid it to rest. Afterward, the story was fully posted to a couple of websites and art was made in 2011. The legacy kind of just simmers down from there. I'm sure art is still being made and videos as well, but from what I know, there doesn't seem to be much media focused on this creepypasta, other than a handful of YouTube videos like this one, discussing and or reading the story. As it simply doesn't measure up to the massive legacy of a creepypasta progenitor like Jeff the Killer, I'm going to be a little bit harsh here. In terms of depth, I give Ben Drowned a 3 out of 5 skeletons. Yes, I know that isn't harsh, but it is lower than what I typically will give for a pasta like this. With the individual ratings out of the way, Ben Drowned is left with 15 out of 20 spooky scary skeletons, or 75%. This is a solid C. I think it is an acceptable rating, and right around average for creepypastas of this caliber. Perhaps those with a higher interest in the paranormal would rate this story higher than I, but this score is final. Alright everyone, that wraps up our look at Ben Drowned. This was definitely a more focused video than some of the other chronicles, but the pasta itself is both long and unique in its subject, which makes up for the lack of section of topics this time around. Regardless, I do still think it's an acceptable and quality creepypasta in its own right, and I hope you would all agree. If you enjoyed the video, consider shooting a like and a sub my way. Check out my channel for more creepypasta content, as well as other narration content. Stay tuned, and stay cool.